Well, welcome to the Bentley Speaking Podcast. I am your host, Didi Gladowski, and I am so excited for 2025. Happy New Year. It's January, so I guess I could still say it's January. It's a new year. I'm really excited for 2025, what that's going to bring for each and every one of you. And for my listeners, I wish you the best of the new year. And what have I been up to? Well, I took some time off, even though I've been retired since August or July. Took some time off. Oh, Bucky, I see you, Bucky. Welcome to the podcast. Happy 2020. I said, you know what, BJ? I like the fact that this is organic. So please, if that dog barks, it's speaking. He wants to be part of the interview. So really. Uh, and so, anyway, I am excited for my first guest. And thank you, BJ, for being the first guest for the podcast 2025, right? And I'm excited she's a friend, a former colleague while we both served in the military, in the Air Force. And Bessie Johnson, you look great.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you, BJ. And for people listening out there or watching, if you're watching it, this is the first time we've connected in, what is it, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, it's been a while.
If not longer. I mean, we've talked a little bit occasionally here and there, but this is the first time that we've kind of looked at each other and like, hey. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you. So for those listening, can you tell us who's BJ? Who's Bessie Johnson? You know what? I just realized I call you BJ habit. It's actually Bessie Johnson for her full name. I love that she's got this old classic Southern Belle
It's vintage
name, old school name, the Gladys, that kind of name. So Bessie Johnson is her full name, and she's a retired master sergeant with the U.S. Air Force. She's as retired as I am, and she's an amazing human being, and I'm really glad to have her. I call her BJ, and most of her friends call her BJ. So, BJ, tell us about who you are and what you're about and your military service, and then also what you're doing now.
Well, again, thank you, dear friend, for having me on. It's an honor. And we'll start off with the name, Bessie. It is a family name. So I am named after my mother, who is named after her aunt. And I have a second cousin, who is named Bessie as well. Same name, Bessie A. She goes
Okay.
by Ann. I go by BJ. So yeah, they took this name and just kept going with it. So it's vintage, not a name to cheer anymore. So
Do you have a middle name? That's something that. Okay, Ann. Oh wow. Okay.
yes, it's Ann. So different parts of my life use different names for me. Like my family and my friends back home in South Carolina, they run my name together. It's Beth Ann. My military family calls me BJ. And some of my professional people, they'll call me Bessie, and I also use a variation of Betsy too. So,
it's so funny. Life is interesting. My grandmother's name was Julianne.
really, that's
Yes.
pretty.
And I thought about naming my daughter Julianne, but I have a cousin, my first cousin, who's named after her. And I said, I don't know how many Juliannes we can have in the family. It's going to be really confusing. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I parked that. But yeah, I did not know about the Ann piece. I've always called you BJ. So that's a connection right there. And she was called Julianne, even though they called her Jenny. And I, for the life of me, didn't understand why they called her that. But, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, so how many years did you serve in the military? Talk about your military journey.
So I served 21 years in the military. I'm originally from South Carolina. And I did 21 years. I had a wonderful career. I started off with my first duty assignment being Barksdale Air Force Base in good old Louisiana. Shreveport, Louisiana. And when I put it on my dream sheet, I thought it was in New Orleans. No, 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 no. So when I got to Keesler and we got all our assignments, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Barksdale. A friend of mine who was from Louisiana, she said, you want to go to Barksdale? I said, yeah, it's in New Orleans. She's like, no, it's not. It's in Shreveport. Nobody would swap with me. So that's where I started off at. So I went there. My second journey to get out of Barksdale on my dream sheet, I put worldwide anywhere. And from there, I went to Osan, went to Korea, loved it, great assignment. And from there, I went to Guam as my follow on. And from Guam, that's where I went to Washington, D.C. and became a Beltway bandit for a little while, where I met you at the Pentagon.
That's
So I did
right.
a BOP,
Oh, you
a
did a
basic
basic preference?
yeah, I did a basic preference
Oh,
because
you
I
not
didn't
know?
get yeah, I didn't get picked up on the overseas assignment, and I being a personnelist, personnelist HR for, civilians out there background, you shouldn't get caught up in going somewhere you don't want to go. So I wasn't going to play that game. I knew the BOP system, so I did that and got my follow on to the Pentagon, which was my third choice. And then from there, I went to Andrews Air Force Base
Mm-hmm.
and I did OSI. From there, I had a blast and got picked up to go to USC in downtown Los Angeles, where I worked with the Air Force ROTC detachment. One of the best assignments of my career. I absolutely had a blast. Location, people, the cadets, everything. And then from there, I got my follow on to Equal Plus, and I got selected to go to US SOCOM and McDill. And that's where I retired at. And I had a few deployments in there too. I did a deployment to Bagram in Afghanistan, and I did another deployment to Prince Sultan Air Base,
He's
PSAP. Yeah, so I did a deployment there.
girl, we've got like so many things because I mean, obviously, I didn't know all the intricates with your military career, but in the sec, right? I came in as medical admin, put everything overseas, got none of those things, got sent to Ellsworth, South Dakota, first duty station.
No.
And I was like, what is this? What is this place? And of course, and I get there and I was like, working in the medical field was not for me. Even though my mom was a nurse, I was like, it's not my thing. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to cross train into personnel, HR, because then I realized that we had a lot more options of places to go. And I knew one of the reasons I joined the military was to travel for free. So I was like, okay, you know what? And I cross trained. And I remember being a senior airman and I picked up the phone. Now you have to remind you, this is back in the day. It's like you don't go direct to the fam and call the fam in the Pentagon. But see what it was, I worked in the commander's support staff in the hospital because when I was going through the cross training process. And I remember I went on the global lists email and I found who the fam was for personnel.
That's so deep.
I literally, and while I was going through all of this, I got a follow on to Pope and out to North Carolina. And I said, no, I'm not going. I said, I'm going to go to this overseas. And I picked up the phone and I called the fam. Senior airman now, you have to understand, right? I was so scared. I was like, two ways. This could go two ways. They could hang up on me, or I could actually maybe make way. And I remember calling, and I spoke to the fan. It was a chief, and I don't remember what his name was. And I know he was laughing the entire time. I was calling him. I said, "I'll take any overseas location you got. What you got open?" And he's laughing at me. He says, "You know what? I have nothing open at this time, but I have Kunsan." I said, "I don't care where it is. I'll go anywhere." And that was how I ended up in Kunsan. And of course, going overseas, you get your first choice or your follow on. And of course, my dream was to be in the Pentagon because the Pentagon was this place in my mind at that time was like this grandeur, the hill. Like, where is this building? I want to be in that building. And I was like, I chose the Pentagon. And obviously, long story short, that's how we met, right? 2003,
Wow. I did not
August.
know that was your journey as well from the
Yep.
beginning. I knew
Yep.
you went to Coincide
Yep. I
and
went
came
to
to Pentagon
Kusan.
from there, but I didn't realize that
So
that was
that
a
was our
journey.
intersect. That's what I'm saying. It's like it's funny. Those are the three things that we so far in the first 10 minutes that we've been talking, we have that connection, right?
Huh?
And so I love it. Like, yeah, but that's when we met. I remember coming to the Pentagon, and I remember walking into the building of the Pentagon. Do you remember your first time in the Pentagon? What was your thoughts? I mean,
It
I don't know. Were
was
you overwhelmed?
well, my first time in the Pentagon, Washington D.C. It was all of it was so much to take in. But walking into the Pentagon for the first time, it was a lot to take in. It was
Yeah.
different from what I expected because of you have the older sides of the building, you have the newer rings and things like that. So I was taken aback by that, and also that it had all these shops and all these different things in there. So it was overwhelming. It was.
So how would you say your time in the military was, I'm sure you would say it was well served, right? What was end of military life like for you? So when did you know it's time for you to go? Did you go because, oh, it was time for me to go? Was there a reason that you said, okay, I need to retire now? walk me Walk us through that journey that said, okay, now I'm gonna put in my papers.
Absolutely. Coming in the military for me was, and I'm not just saying this, I mean, it really did change my life. It's probably one of the single best decisions that I made for myself as a young person because I came in at 21. I tried college for a couple of years, and at that time, I wasn't ready for it. So I was gung ho about leaving the small town that I was from and just doing something different. I just wanted to do something different. So I took the ASVAB a couple of times. Took the ASVAB a couple of times. And on the second time that I took it, I remember my recruiter, Clark Elliott. Awesome guy. He, from where the recruiting office was to where I was working in the Walmart Jewelry Department in Union, South Carolina, and the recruiting office was in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which was probably about 45 minutes away. And he knew what my struggle was to get into the military, to get through the ASVAB and do what I needed to do to get in. And I just remember sitting there at work one day, kind of leaning on the counter because it was kind of slow that day. And I see him walking down the aisle. What's he doing here? And he comes with this outgoing personality. He's like, "You got it. You got it. You got it. You
Yeah.
got it." I was like, we standing there and we're like, so that moment changed my life.
Mm.
Within 2 months, I did a short time in the delayed entry program. Within 2 months, I was shipped off. He even guided me in selecting the right job. So I came in, I didn't come in open general. I came in guaranteed personnel. So when we were sitting there with the book and everything, when we were at MEPS and all these things, he's like, I think, based on what you like to do, your personality, this is going to be the best job for you. Let me tell you what it is. So I came in guaranteed. And from there along the way, being a young person, being shaped by the military, having the opportunity to work with some amazing leaders, which I learned from, and some not so amazing leaders that I
Yeah.
learned. And I would
Mhm.
say those leaders I learned the most from
Yeah,
were the
I
not
agree.
so good
I agree.
leaders, the not so good supervisors, and some of the challenges that I had along the way. So I got to do all of these cool assignments, meet these wonderful people, lead some amazing troops, and some troops that gave me some stress too, but I learned from them too. And I still keep in touch with most of my troops, pretty much most of them. through Facebook or Instagram and things like that. But when I got to McDill, which probably being at the height of my career, probably some of the most intense learning that I ever had with working at, SOCOM, because it was so unique, so dynamic, high ops tempo. And, coming there as a senior NCO, I had to learn a lot. I had to learn fast and, take on a lot of different responsibilities. But it really shaped me even more as a supervisor, as a leader, you know, being part of bringing on the force distribution program to US SOCOM and its TSOS. It was really changing. So while I'm going through this awesome assignment and doing all these awesome things there, I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis while I was there. So by that time, I'm at about 18 and a half, 19 years, getting ready to hit 19 years or something like that. I'm checking all the boxes, doing all those things. I could just taste senior, you know?
Yeah.
And I get diagnosed with this illness. I mean, here I am preparing to go. I was on the IG team. So here I am preparing to go to Europe to one of our TSOCs to do the IG inspections out there for the first time. It has always been my lifelong goal, dream to go to Europe. I had never got the opportunity to be stationed there or anything like that. But I was finally going to go out there. I think I was going for a week, 2 weeks. I forgot how long it was, but we were going out there, part of the IG team, to do the inspection. And the weekend before I got ready to go, I had already been going to see the doctor for some symptoms that I was having. So by that time, they had me going to a neurologist. And I get to the neurologist and she says, she'd been seeing me for months by this time. So with her last MRI, she says, I'm going to have to put you in the hospital because I don't know whether or not I'm looking at a brain tumor. Everything just seemed to just...
Mm.
So fast forward to going through that whole ordeal. Like you, like we were talking about in the beginning, I could have stayed if I wanted to stay. I wouldn't have been able to deploy anymore though. But, I had a really good relationship with my commander and things of that nature. So, they did ask me, so what do you want to do? And it was at that moment I knew I was already almost at 20 years. By the time we got through the MEB, the medical evaluation board, I would have been at 20 or over, the way that the board ended up going. So I said, you know what, just go ahead and sign the paperwork to release me, to retire. And that's what we did. So I
Was it?
knew it was time to go.
Yeah.
At that moment, when you know when it's time to go, because before that ordeal and that diagnosis, all I saw was doing what I need to do, check the boxes so that I can make senior, get overseas and do the next job and do the next thing, and retire after a few years of having senior on. But once I got diagnosed with MS, everything shifted. The way that I looked at life, the way that I looked at myself, the way that I looked at my career now, everything changed, because now what became important was not what was important 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Now it was about my health, physically
Mm.
and mentally. So I decided to transition and retire, even though I didn't know what that was going to look like.
Wow. So what were some of the symptoms? I know you said when you got there, what were some of the things that symptoms you were feeling that made you say, okay, no, let me go get checked? Or was it just something that they found on a routine checkup?
No, it started with symptoms that they were so mild that I kind of wrote them off for a long time. When I was deployed in Afghanistan, before I got to SOCOM, that's where it started because my feet would go numb. And I thought it was my boots. I was like, I'm not used to wearing these steel-toed boots. And that's what's happening. So I go online and order me some Nike boots because clearly it must be boots. So by the time I got back to USC, because that's where I deployed from, I was still having the numbness and tingling. About 6 months passed. I get to SOCOM, more time passed. So it started then, but I just kind of looked past it. But it was the numbness, the tingling in my legs and my feet. And then I started noticing sensory changes in my feet. My feet, being at McDill in Florida, as hot as it is here, my feet would get so cold. It would almost feel like I was standing in a bucket of ice. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Then my legs were tingling and numb, but I still didn't think anything of it. Then fast forward, dizziness starts coming in. This vertigo type of feeling that wouldn't go away while I'm driving to work. Thank goodness I only had a short commute. Driving to work, it would just be this constant loop of vertigo, of dizziness. It was subtle, not enough to make me, fall out or anything. But then fast forward again, one weekend, I'm out shopping and I almost pass out while I'm in the store. I had to catch myself on side of one of the racks that was in there. And I said, okay, something's not right. So I go to the doctor and he says, oh, well, it's like May. So he's like, you probably got allergy. So he puts me on this allergy routine of medicine for about a week. These symptoms don't subside, the vertigo and things of that nature. And I'm like, okay. I said, you know what, doc, it's not helping. It's not working. Thankfully, he was a good doctor. He listened to me. And he said, you know what? I'm going to send you to ENT. Let's get ENT to take a look. So when I get to ENT, and I get to ENT, it takes a while for you to get the referral and all these things. So time is still passing. So by the time I get to ENT, by this time, now my vision is weird. It's feeling like this. My eyes are kind of like this. So I'm like, okay, something is really off. ENT says, you know what? Let's do an MRI. Let's just do an MRI. So do an MRI. We get out of there. He does a brain MRI. Takes a while for those results to come back. Active duty. You kind of not think about it. Just waiting on the results to come back. And I go in for my follow up. I think he reaches out to me. His office reaches out to me. So we go in for a follow up. And I'm sitting there in the exam room. And I get this feeling that something just doesn't feel right. Internally, something just doesn't feel right. Because it's taking him an excessively long time to come back in and talk to me. So I'm like, okay, something doesn't feel right. I don't know what this doctor's going to tell me. So when he finally comes in, he says, we got your MRI back. And he says, so you have a spot on your brain. He said, normally that's kind of indicative of multiple sclerosis. He was like, I'm not saying that's what it is. Let's get you back downstairs to your primary care provider and get your referral out to neurology. So I go back downstairs. I go to the SOCOM clinic. I tell them everything. My doctor wasn't available. They leave a message. I get home around 5 o'clock. My doctor calls me. He said, I got the message. I'm going to put in a referral for you to go to neurology. And once I get that referral, it starts, this process of multiple MRIs, visits to a vestibular doctor, to check my balance and things of that nature. So I go to I'm all over the place, getting all kind of different tests at that time. So I think my neurologist did maybe about 3 or 4 MRIs over the course of a few months. And on that last MRI, that's when she came back and said, I don't know whether or not I'm looking at a brain tumor, so I'm going to put you in the hospital. My mind just went blank. And I'm by myself. I'm at the doctor. This lady is telling me I might have a brain tumor. After all these visits, I don't even know how I drove myself home. because she was like, well, we need to put you in the hospital. So I'm like, I can't go to the hospital right now. I need to go home because I have pets. My mind isn't even thinking right now.
Yeah.
So it was definitely shocking, just that at that moment. So that's what, long story to get to my symptoms, started off with numbness, tingling, a change of sensation, and then the symptoms began to progress. So, and that's
Interesting.
what caused me to go to the doctor.
So I can't even imagine. I mean, I can relate, right? To some degree, because I think it's funny. I think I got checked for lupus as well, but a lot of my symptoms were kind of what you went through with yours. Obviously, mine was a brain injury from the meningitis affecting me, but the therapy, the running up and down, and I wasn't alone. And that was the thing, right? Is I was going to ask you, what was your coping mechanism with all of that? You couldn't have been doing it by yourself. Did you have, I know your mom is a big supporter of your life, obviously, but what was your coping mechanism with all that? You know, how, when you hear something like that, you definitely should not be by yourself, because I know the diagnosis I went through affected my mental health.
Badly affected my mental health. Um, even though I was here, even though I was here alone per se, I didn't, going through that moment with the wonderful support I had of the Care Coalition, SOCOM, coworkers, friends. Initially, I didn't, and my mom, of course, she got herself here as quick as she could when I got admitted to the hospital. And friends that were not even here, which,
How long were
I
you in the
talked to
hospital
readily that
for?
Hmm?
How
I was
long
in
were
the
you in
hospital
the?
for a week. A week.
Okay, and you
So
were in the hospital for all the testings, right? Was
I
that
was
what
in
it?
the hospital for more testings because now I'm with a neurosurgeon
Okay,
who
yeah,
comes in the
okay.
night that I get admitted, and he says, hey, I hear you're in here for a brain tumor. I said, no, sir, I don't have
God
a brain
forbid,
tumor.
yeah.
I said, we're in here to see if this spot that my doctor sees on my mind, on my brain, is a brain tumor. He said, okay. So we went from there, and more tests, more MRIs, brain and spinal tap, to really determine if I had any lesions. Lesions is scarring due to the immune system attacking your central nervous system. That's essentially what MS does. So that's what I had in my brain, was they call lesions, scarring. So that's when the doctor saw the scarring on my brain, the neurosurgeon, they didn't see any lesions in my spine or in my neck. So a few days later, when we got through all of that and the spinal taps and everything, and he says, I got some good news and I got some bad news. Good news is you don't have a brain tumor. But bad news is you have multiple sclerosis. And at that moment, sitting there, getting back to, the point of how did I cope, I had one of my good friends, coworkers, who was sitting there with me at the moment. He was like, do you want me to leave the room? And I was like, no, no, stay. So I was able to cope because of the support system that I had through the military. I did not feel alone because the whole 7 days I was in the hospital, I think my mom got there on like day 3. It was a revolving door of coworkers, friends, just coming in and out, checking on me, bringing me food, so flowers, just so I was able to cope in the beginning because of that support system that I had.
Yeah, that's one thing, I don't know, BJ, if you remember in 2008 when I had my jaw surgery, you were there for me too,
Yeah,
you know.
I remember.
I remember because the doctor was like, yeah, do you have somebody with me? And because we were neighbors, we lived
Yeah,
across the street from each other. And I remember you were just like, no, I'll come get you. And I think it's just, I look at it like life is you poured into me, and people poured back into you, and I'm glad for that. But I'm just so sorry that you have to go through this journey. But the fact that you now have this diagnosis, just like with anything, when you get like what I call those types of news, those kind of setback, I know for me, my faith, right? My belief in God was definitely something I clinged on to, because you're so scared
Yes.
when you get news like that and you find your life is changed. You're scared. You go through the gamut of emotions, and that fear, I just remember like, okay, getting into the Bible for me, just trying to find comfort spiritually and asking God to give me the strength to go through the journey of whatever it is I need to go through. And
Absolutely.
then for me, luckily, having an amazing husband, I can't tell you enough, because I will not forget my husband having to literally take COVID tests every day, 45 days, just to see me. Think about that. Just to get your nose swabbed every single day, just to
And that is
visit
an extreme
me,
test. Yes.
right? And so it takes a lot, you having that, going through the journey of that diet. Hi, Bucky. I see Bucky. You having to go through.
Sorry.
No, please don't apologize. It brings joy. I told you, I got too many poodles because of Bucky. Yeah, for all those listening, Bucky's got an Instagram page. Do you still post anyway? We got sidetracked here.
Often late, but I'm gonna get back on there to posting.
I'm gonna
On the
ask you about
train.
Bucky and Simba. She's got a cat, Simba the cat. But back to coping strategies, right? So you obviously had your military family, and that's awesome. But tell me what you did for yourself to help you through this journey, because obviously there are no cures for MS. So
Yeah,
what have you done for yourself to help you cope through this journey?
I will say, just like yourself, my faith was key because that first night in the hospital, I was bargaining with God and everything. So,
Yeah.
but my faith, and I will say, one of the bargainings was, Lord, if you please get me through this, I will not take my life for granted again. Because I guess up to that point, I kind of felt like I was in some ways taking it for granted, or not really doing the things that was put in my spirit to do.
Yeah.
But my faith was paramount. You know, I grew up in the church. My mom is a praying woman. She prayed for me. My family was praying for me. So, from that aspect, I I would say, maybe not as healthy, but one of the things that I did to cope was to learn all that I could about him. So I went on a deep dive. I don't recommend people do this, but it was helpful for me to learn as much as I can. And by learning so much, I'm able to share that with people who are diagnosed now, you know, and through my research and learning about all of the different medications that were out, how they work, how they interact with your body, foods, diets. Through all of that, I found the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, which is an awesome wealth of knowledge. And through that, I found like MS. So because the way that I worked out had changed because I was on a profile, because one thing about overexertion or heat and stuff like that, it will cause a flare up or exacerbate, your symptoms and things like that. The scarring that's already done to your brain or wherever you have your scarring or your lesions at. And so my doctors didn't want me running. anymore. So I was on a profile where I wasn't running, but at the same time, I still need to maintain military standards. So I was like, well, and I was already heavy into spinning and cycle bar and soul cycle and all these things anyway. Loved it. So that was a way that I coped because I was already doing it, even though they was not crazy about me doing it because of that heat aspect and causing the flare up. Yeah, my feet would go numb in there, but I kept doing it anyway. So then I went and got me a bike from Walmart, got me just a regular old bike, and I started riding outside. And I forgot how much I loved riding a bike as a child and just finding different trails. And I ended up finding riding groups to ride with and do all these cool rides. And, I'm living here in Florida too. So I would go to Courtney Causeway Trail, which is, if you're familiar with Florida, it's this beautiful trail that lines the water. And it was peaceful. So, I was able to do that. I started doing yoga as well. And yoga out, but it was very helpful for me to combat spasticity with MS. So that's how I coped. I coped with researching, learning as much as I could, um, redefining who I was with this new diagnosis and how I approached, working out. And it's not that my mental health didn't take a hit because it did. I mean, that was a really heavy hit, but with my mom and her guidance and her encouragement, she was key. She was definitely key in my coping and encouraging me and, keeping me uplifted and motivated. So I didn't sink even deeper into a depressed hole than I already was. Cause I'll make no bones about it. I did slide into a depression, even with biking and doing biking mess and those things, because not only was I dealing with this life changing, incurable disease, my military career was ending too. So it was a
Yeah.
lot at one time.
Yeah. Redefining who you are. So who are you? Who's
Well,
BJ
now,
now?
after going through all of that, I am much more resilient because of those things. I am strong most days. I am capable. I am a fighter because I'm not going to just let multiple sclerosis or depression, anxiety take me down, because I've been to the darkest levels with it. Because being with MS, it affects your brain. So depression is a side effect of it. Not with it just being a side effect of MS. I mean, with all of the changes I was going through, it was bound to happen too. But it got dark. It got dark. But because I was able, through the support of my family, my mother, and God, and Jesus, YouTube. Oh my God, I went on YouTube every morning when I got up. One of my coping mechanisms and redefining who I was, spirituality and listening to a lot of podcasts, like Jay Shetty, and that's one. He's like he was a monk, so and you know awesome motivation with, talks about coping and Brendan Burchard and things like that. So I will listen to these motivational podcasts every morning just to get my head in a good space, to try to fight, with some of the dark places that I was in. I would listen to these podcasts before I got ready to go to work. I had my iPad on the counter listening to that while I was getting ready. Then I turned on the podcast in the car and listened to it until I got to work. So through that, family, God, that's how I cope. And now I am strong, resilient, and better for it, and know that I can get through those moments. I try not to let myself get that far off anymore because I know how hard it is to come back. But I know that as a fighter, as somebody who is resilient and has coping mechanisms and knows how to get through those things, then I'm better for it.
Yeah, I got emotional a little bit when you were talking about that, right? It's because I know prior to us started, talking through this podcast, we had conversation on just the identity. Who are you? And I remember asking myself that question. You could remember what I was
Yeah,
like, right?
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
working out, running, lifting, being in fitness, and just being that go charger. And then all of a sudden, you're you're not that person anymore. But it's not the end,
No,
because obviously you survived. You're alive. You're not in a box. And as long as you have breath, you are, you still have your purpose. You still have that journey that you need to walk through. What is that like? You can take it two ways. You can shrivel and fall victim to what's happened to you, or you can sit upright and just like you've done and find and redefine, like you said, your purpose, right?
mhm,
And look for better ways. And what I do find for me is I look for ways to give back. I try to do a lot with volunteer or something. I feel good doing that. And I still look for ways to serve. I think once again, another thing that we had in common, I came in at 21, just like so we didn't come in right out of high school,
no.
you know? Um, and so when I came in, I was pretty grounded and I knew what I wanted to do. I don't think I really floated very much. Now, what I didn't know was, I know when I joined, I wanted to just do 4 years of service. I said 4 years, I was done. But I came in at a time and 2 years in, September 11th happened, and that changed my trajectory, right? That's when I knew, okay, I know now what my purpose is. And eventually I stayed, the 25 and a half that I did. Um, But yes, it is a journey of trying to find and rediscover who we are. But when you do, you like it. And that was why I asked you to be part of the team. And I'm grateful that you are going to be part of the Vet Speak Media team, because I feel like the reason I like doing this podcast is I enjoy storytelling. I think just like MS, I honestly did research as well before coming to you. It's different for different folks. The symptoms, the progression, the speed or not. I did look it up. It's different. Same thing is with a podcast. We as veterans, military veterans, can tell our stories a million different ways because everybody's journey is very unique, just like life, right? And so I think you would be a great mentor to somebody that says, I was diagnosed with MS. What was your experience like? Because what I like doing with this podcast is not just talking about the issue or the topic, but also I will have resources on my website for people that have that happen to them and want to know where to start. I know the VA has a lot of resources, but I would also want to, especially also as a minority woman, if there are specific resources geared towards Black women who are going through MS, if those resources exist. And again, I also would like to know about resources that don't cost money at all, because
Mhm.
not everybody has all that kind of amount of money or insurance that would cover all of that. But I know that there are probably resources out there that are grants or that are free. Does that make sense? And
It
so,
does. And those resources do exist because, treatments for MS are very expensive. But
yeah,
there are resources out there that can assist with that. And, I'm happy to delve into those and help people with that. And like you said, the community with minority women and things, or just minorities in general, especially minority women, because more women are more likely to get MS than men. But there are great groups out there, minority women, a few different platforms that I follow that have been really helpful for advocating for minorities.
Yeah. And again, after this podcast, we will post all that on my website, all the resources that BJ uses to help her cope for anyone that's listening that can identify with being diagnosed themselves or someone that they love with MS. That's so important to have support. And I think that's another reason, right? We don't walk through the journey alone. We are not, there's nobody that could go through this life isolated and you come out on the other end successful, right? And
Absolutely.
so I think sharing the experiences that we have had to walk through is so important to do. So BJ, do you still bike?
Do. And that is one
How many
way.
miles do you bike a week?
Right now, being that it's been cold, I have not been on the bike.
It's cold in Florida.
Yes, it's like, what is our
Girl,
temperature there? I think we
girl,
might be
you were
about
in,
65.
girl, wasn't it you and I remember Snowmageddon in DC when we were stuck in the
Yeah.
house for like 3 days, we couldn't get out.
Yes, no forgetting. I will never forget that.
So I was like, I think you can handle it. But yes, I get it,
Yes.
so
So I'm about to start back biking because, I get involved with Bike MS each year. I've had the opportunity to ride with Bike MS here in Florida. I had a chance to do the Bike MS Chesapeake in Maryland. And I like to get involved and ride in those because I get to meet people. I get to meet people that are newly diagnosed. I get to meet people and talk about their journey, different treatments. And I just like to get out there and interact with the community. So this year, instead of being a participant, I'm going to be a volunteer. So I want to be a ride marshal this year and get out there on the trail and help
and
out that
cheer
way.
people on.
Yeah, cheer people on, make sure they're okay and things like that. So, and we have a group that's out there that are I ride with MS. So when they're on the trail, they have their jerseys on that says I ride with MS. It is a marker to let those people know who are participating in the ride that these people who are riding in the ride actually are living with the illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Have they talked about throughout your process medically, have they talked about any kind of research progression? I know there are no treatments, but what's the word for research and where medically are we moving along in trying to find some kind of cure, or are they medications that help with keeping you guys from progressing? Does that make sense? I'm trying to figure
yes,
out how far along in MS,
yes.
and are you part of that conversation, at least you asking that question from the medical side of things?
Now, when I was in Maryland, I was part of the research with Johns Hopkins when I was there, with studying some of the newer drugs and things that are coming out on the market. But of course, our goal is always to find a cure to eradicate, the disease, which, you have the scientists that are in the lab. Their ultimate goal is that every day, are we getting closer? We're closer than we were or better off, and there are better medications than there were 20 years ago. Whereas 20 years ago, there probably was only 3 or 4 medicines on the market to slow disease progression. Because as you know, there is no cure for MS. You have people who take the holistic approach to MS, or they do it in conjunction with medications, but there are multiple type of medications on the market to help slow disease progression. They're called disease modifying drugs. So, and I'm on one of those as well as the disease modifying drug because as I got diagnosed, whereas we only saw couple of lesions in the beginning of the MRIs. By the time I got put in the hospital, they saw a few more lesions, which mean that the disease was progressing quickly. So for me, I wanted to get on a disease modifying drug to do what I could without knowing all that I know now about, diet and holistic approaches to treatment as well, to try to slow the disease progression. So yes, there are numerous medications on the market now, just depending on where you are within that journey, or whether you're relapsing and remitting, secondary or primary progressive. So, but there are different levels of medications for wherever you may fall on that spectrum.
Okay. Are you on one medication or do you have to take multiple medication?
I'm on one medication, which I take once a month. I
Oh,
started off
okay.
with medications every other day, which were injections that I had to give myself. And then I moved to oral pill form, which I took twice a day, every day. And then the disease progressed. And maybe about 3 years ago, the disease progressed and I ended up back in the hospital because of disease progression. And I moved to a different medication where it is now an infusion, which I have to go to the hospital for once a month. And I take that. It takes us about, from beginning to end, with the labs that have to be done before, it's about 3 hour process. And I do that once
BJ.
a month now. And it has been very helpful. And of course these medicines have risks and side effects, but
Yeah. What are the side effects? What are some of the side effects of some of the medications you take?
one of the side effects with this medications is some of the more, you know, severe, I would say, risks, because I don't really have a lot of side effects from the medications that I've taken. Maybe a little bit of nauseousness when I first began, but I can tolerate the medications very well. I just had to move up in medications because of the disease progression. Now, with this particular medication, it has some risk to it with all medications. PML is one of the big.
PML.
It is a it is a brain. It could be a fatal brain disease. So that's why you're doing treatments to test your labs every 3 months to make sure that there's not a marker in there. And if that marker is in there, that tells the doctor, hey, this marker is here. When this marker is present,
You have
this
to
can
stop it.
progress to something, and we stop it and we move to a different type of medication. So the cases of those are low, but it is a risk with taking the medicine. And I look at it like this. I want to stay able, moving, and healthy as long as I can. So it's a risk that I take with the medications, because I can take the risk with the medication, or I could take the risk with the disease progressing to disability. Whereas I might not be able to walk, I might not be able to move, but it's not a risk that I'm willing to take. So I take the medication. That's how I approach it. I know that there are many different ways to approach it and different ways to look at it. I will say that each month I'm trying to be better on my diet, because I know that diet is key with
Yeah.
your inflammation down. So you keep your flare ups down and you kind of keep the disease at bay. But that is challenging. And there's Dr. Walls is a extraordinary doctor who has MS. And she has a book called the Walls Protocol, which goes from from the beginning to the end. It's like from how to tackle this disease. She was in a wheelchair, almost about to lose her doctor's license because she progressed so quickly. But she almost did a dissertation on, instead of all these like many pills or vitamins that she was taking to get what she needed to help her body recover, she found it in foods. So through that, she was able to come out of a wheelchair, start back walking, and completely turn herself around just through nutrition. She
I,
doesn't take
yeah.
any GMTs. However, she doesn't advocate against it. So my goal is to get to the point where I'm following that. So
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress.
There's so much to what we put in our, in
It
our
is.
mouth for food
Mm-hmm.
that matters, right? Because I
Yes.
mean, I did the same thing, it's funny because the FDA just came out where they took out the dye I literally, if you go to my website, I started to go into baking my own bread. So I do my own bread, my own butter. These are like simple things. They
Yeah,
don't,
that's key.
it's not much. And so now I'm in the habit, my kids too now, we look at it. If it's more than 5 things and I can't pronounce anything in that thing, food, I don't want it. Now,
I
I'm
don't
not
blame
saying
you.
that I'm perfect, but I've been doing that 80% of the time, which I find that so helpful for me, at least. But wow, I could talk to you for more hours. And I feel like I'm so grateful that you're going to be part of this team, part of my team for the website, because I think that I see us having a continuing conversation on what you're going through. And I really hope that even if you touch one person that's like, oh my God, okay, I can reach out and I would love to have that camaraderie and talk about what we're going through and exchange notes. That's a win in my mind. But having a brain injury is not easy. It's not simple.
No,
I know that every time I want to go for my checkup, I'm human. I get nervous because I'm like, I just hope they don't find anything else or I don't have to deal with anything else. But what I always tell people, God won't give you anything that you can't handle,
that's right.
and you're not by yourself. If you remember that, even when you don't have the family support, let's say, there always somebody that you can reach out to and say, hey, you know what, would like to talk or need help. One thing we're really good at in the military family circuit, we're good at doing that. We're good at supporting each other.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful. BJ, thank you so much for coming on.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. And I will say this right here, this, I got this guy.
Is he your support? Is he your emotional support? Is he
Yes, when I was
okay?
going through my diagnosis and treatments, my psychologist, she told me because, the amount of time I was spending in the house and not going out, have you thought about getting a dog? Because, we talk about me being an animal person. And that's one of the things that got me through a lot, just getting off the
Yes.
doing that first year of being diagnosed, getting off the couch and getting outside, just walking the dog itself was so critical. So
Yeah,
he is
BJ,
my
that's why I
emotional
got
support
mine
guy.
too. Same thing. My poodles at ESA, and that's why I got them.
Yeah,
Because when I
me too.
couldn't walk and I got so scared of walking and my balance. But when I got them, and I got two. So, the challenge of just even walking one initially on a leash and having two now that I had to walk, I had to keep my balance. Walking two of them became extra therapy. I
Mhm.
make it, I always tell people, I don't care what you're doing. If you can get 30 minutes of sunlight, even when there's no sun, of getting that rhythm in the morning outside, it's so important. And
Yeah.
they were like, we got to go walking. We got to go walking. And they really helped me, to kind of continue on when I was not, having to go to Fisher House to go through my walking therapy and things like that. So yeah. And I love poodles. They're Velcro dogs. My
They
poodles
are.
are
They're people.
always, they think they're humans.
They're people. So
So, but yes, BJ, thank you for coming and sharing your experience and giving us a lot of insights into the world of your journey through MS. Um, Thank you for your service. Thank you for your friendship of 24 plus years. I'm really, really grateful for you. And for those listening, thanks for tuning in to this episode of At Least Speaking. I can tell you, I know we've had an enlightening conversation today with BJ, with Bessie Johnson, who has been gracious to share her journey as a military veteran living with multiple sclerosis, her insights into resilience, the importance of mental health, the power of community and support has been very enlightening. Her unique challenges faced by veterans with chronic illness is a thing, and it takes a lot of different shapes and forms. And chronic illness is chronic, but there are ways that we can definitely live with them and with good support. So having that forum like this, for me, I know is some way that I've dealt with my own trauma is crucial. And so thank you, BJ. This definitely allows us to engage, right, in open dialogue and share our experiences. Visibility it's a good thing to have. So tune in to the next episode of Bentley Speaking Podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share with other fellow veterans who might benefit from the information that we talked about in this episode. So until next time, take care and stay informed. Thank you.